Hello, my fine feathered friends, and welcome back to another episode of how to put together your favorite Destiny 2 builds and the best Destiny 2 builds in the Edge of Fate so that you can beat absolutely any piece of content with a 100 gifted sub bomb going on in the intro thanks to Gork and Zola. What an absolutely hype episode. Today, I am showing you guys my absolute favorite Hunter build that I ran for the entirety of last episode of Heresy. Every single piece of challenging content, I was running this build. Every single raid, I was running this build. Every single solo flawless dungeon, I was running this build. Every single Grandmaster Nightfall, I was running this build. And this is the build that I plan to run in all pieces of difficult content in the Edge of Fate. I plan to run it in the contest mode raid. It is my favorite build by far, and I'm going to show you exactly how you want to put it together. But before I show you how to put it together, let me give you a little taste of what it's capable of. I'm in the firing range right here, and I've got many very tanky Centurions, like mini boss level enemies. These are going to be like champions that you're going to find in endgame content and tanky enemies that you're going to find in endgame content, and we're absolutely going to carve through them while maintaining a ludicrous amount of damage buffs. So we're going to smoke that guy. That's going to give us a tangle. Then we're going to go to the tangle. Then we can get our tangle back, maybe even throw it again, hit another melee. Then we get our gunpowder gamble. We can blow that guy up. Then we can throw another melee, hit our Ascension to give us amplified, give us back another melee. Then we'll reload our hand cannon real quick. We get another tangle. Let's go ahead and grapple to it. Grapple melee that guy. That's going to give us another gunpowder gamble. Throw it in there. Throw it in there. Look at the ability uptime. Look at how quick all of my abilities are back. Over and over and over and over again. So let's start by talking about what kind of we got going on here right now. The exotic armor. It's going to be the Spirit of the Surturacne and Spirit of the Inmost Light class item. In my opinion, this is by far the best exotic class item in the entire game for Hunter. You have other class items that can be exceptionally good with certain setups, don't get me wrong, like Caliban and Liar with combination blow, but for general gameplay, this setup is absolutely unmatched. Spirit of the Surturacne, gain Woven Mail when you use your grenade, which means anytime we cast our grapple grenade, we are going to get Woven Mail, which is a very high damage resistance buff, which is absolutely key for anything like contest mode rating content, key for any high level content that we're going to need to be doing to get tier 4 and tier 5 gear and end game portal activities. Gunpowder Gamble is also going to proc this, so you can not only proc Woven Mail with your grapple grenade, which you get back very quickly, but you can also proc it when you sling your gunpowder gamble. Next is Spirit of the Inmost Light, where using an ability empowers the other two abilities, granting them improved energy regeneration. Now, previously pre-Edge of Fate, before the stat rework, this was already exceptionally good and allowed for borderline infinite ability uptime and infinite ability spam. But with the Edge of Fate and the stat rework, if we distribute our stats correctly, we can actually make this intrinsic Spirit of Inmost Light better than it ever was before, offering even higher ability regeneration rates than it ever did before. And I'll show you exactly how you want to distribute your stats to accomplish that in a little bit. But first things first, I want to talk specifically about how the Spirit of Inmost Light interacts with this build in terms of what procs it. So with our basic abilities here, we've got our Gambler's Dodge, which is actually not being used for Gambler's Dodge at all typically. We're mainly using it with Ascension. Main reason we want to use it with Ascension is even though Ascension did get a slight nerf and lose a Fragment slot, it gives us Amplified and jolts everything nearby. Amplified is a absolutely insanely powerful buff ever since the recent changes to it, where when you are amplified, targets that try and shoot you are inaccurate towards you, which for all intents and purposes is basically bonus damage resistance because it just straight up means that you get hit by less things. And what's really cool is that every single person that you hit with this also gets amplified. So like in a team setting, in a day 1 rating setting, in a contest mode setting, you're also helping out your entire team with an ability like this. Activating this will also proc all of the class ability effects that would normally proc if you just used your basic class ability. So using Ascension is going to proc Gambler's Dodge. And now with the Edge of Fate, it will also proc things like class ability based armor mods, things like Reaper, things like Powerful Attraction, things like Bomber, things like Dynamo, where previously it never did. So Ascension is honestly in the best state that it's ever been. Yeah, it unfortunately lost a Fragment slot, but all of the tweaks and buffs to the things that it provides have never been better. The other things that we're going to be doing to proc our Inmost Light is going to be, of course, Threaded Spike, but Threaded Spike is a little bit interesting, and I don't know if this has always been the case. I am 99% sure that it hasn't been, but what I was noticing when I was testing this build is that if I throw my Threaded Spike, back in the day, I would get an instance of empowered abilities when I threw my Threaded Spike. Just one. But now when I throw my Threaded Spike, it gives me an instance of empowered abilities for every single target that I hit with the Threaded Spike. So as you can see right here, from one threaded spike, it's giving me empowered abilities ×2, and it's continuously refreshing for every single guy that I hit. So I'm going to showcase that one more time. I'll get empowered abilities X1 from this guy, and then X2 from that guy. And then as you can see on the left side of my screen, it just continuously keeps refreshing for every single hit that the threaded spike gives. If you're completely tapped out on both of those, one threaded spike throw is going to instantly give you empowered abilities ×2 and basically instantly refund both of those. I don't know if that's always been the case, but it's the case right now. Another interesting interaction with Inmost Light is the grapple grenade, as both the activation of grapple grenade and the grapple melee count as separate instances of ability activations, and therefore will both proc empowered abilities. Let me throw this so I can get empowered abilities ×2 and get my grapple grenade back. I'll let my empowered abilities timer time out as well. So what you'll notice right here is I will get empowered abilities ×1 when I activate the initial instance of grapple grenade, and then when I hit one of the enemies with a grapple melee, it'll then go up to empowered abilities ×2. You actually can't see it, unfortunately, because there we go. I had to get rid of one of my buffs because I had faster protection and whatnot. But as you can see there, with 2 of our 3 basic abilities, we can get to empowered abilities ×2 with just 1 activation of them, which is extremely powerful for maintaining maximum uptime on all 3 of our abilities. You couple that with the fact that Ascension is proccing Gambler's Dodge as well, in conjunction with all of the other things it provides to give us a full melee charge, assuming our stats are correctly distributed. And like, we're in an absolutely beautiful situation. And what's more is, with the new Gambler's Dodge changes, you no longer have to be near enemies for Gambler's Dodge to provide melee ability energy, which means I don't even have to use Ascension around enemies. I can use it like over here in the corner. It'll still give me amplified. It'll still proc empowered abilities, and it'll still fully refund my class ability, even if I'm absolutely nowhere anything, which in more difficult content where maybe you're not always able to be next to enemies, that's absolutely incredible. The final thing I want to talk about when it comes to Inmost Light activation, and not only Inmost Light activation, but also Surturachne activation, is Gunpowder Gamble. So, if I load up a Gunpowder Gamble charge, or I'll butter this guy up a little bit, I got my Gunpowder Gamble ready, you'll notice that Gunpowder Gamble is going to not only proc Woven Mail from the Spirit of Surturachne, but it's also going to proc my empowered abilities. So if I go ahead and chuck that, bang, I've got Woven Mail. You can't see the empowered abilities buff because I'm on Fire Sprite cooldown and Gunpowder Gamble cooldown and whatnot, but it does indeed proc both of them. As far as fragments go, our fragments are absolutely completely identical to what they were when I had this build set up in the previous episode when I made a video about it, but some of the benefits that we're getting from these fragments and how they're functioning with some of the ability choices that we have are slightly different. So we have the faster protection, which is strictly going to give us better damage resistance, but it's also going to give us +10 to our melee stat. And if we get our melee stat over 100, that equates to a straight up damage buff to our melee abilities, not only for our threaded spike, but also to our grapple melee. As something that's very interesting about the grapple melee is that it is not only buffed by grenade damage buffs, but it's also buffed by melee damage buffs, meaning that if you theoretically have 200 grenade stat to give 65% bonus grenade damage, and you also have 200 melee stat to give plus, I believe it's 30% bonus melee damage, both of those damage bonuses apply to grapple melee and will compound. We've also got the Faceted Blessing, where melee final blows start health regeneration, and that not only counts for threaded spike, but of course it also counts for grapple melee, because as we've said before, all instances of grapple melee count as both powered grenade damage and powered melee damage. We've also got the Facet of Hope. While you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. We basically always have amplified, so that's absolutely no problem, and it allows for us to constantly be ripping Ascension, constantly proccing all of the benefits that we get from using it, amplifying everything, amplifying all our teammates, jolting all enemies, and all that goodness. We have also got the Facet of Purpose, so anytime we pick up an Orb of Power, we get a buff depending on our currently equipped super. With this build, you're typically always going to either want to go Golden Gun Marksman, so that this gives you restoration on Orb of Power pickup, or you could totally go with something like Shadow Shot Deadfall, so that you get Overshield on Orb of Power pickup. And honestly, just kind of depends on what activity you're doing and what encounter you're doing and what super makes the most sense for that particular activity, for that particular fight, for that particular encounter. Finally, we have the Facet of Dawn, where powered melee hits against targets makes you radiant, again procced by both threaded spike and by grapple melee. Now, as far as our aspects go, I know I've been talking up Gunpowder Gamble a lot, but it's not actually a requirement for this build. It is exceptionally good, don't get me wrong, especially considering a lot of the recent buffs that it has gotten. As an example, previously Gunpowder Gamble required solar weapon kills to be able to progress Gunpowder Gamble. But nowadays, you actually don't need solar weapon kills specifically. You can get any type of kill. I think that actually counted as a powered melee kill, if I'm not mistaken. So let me showcase with this void weapon right here, and you'll see. Boom, right there. Gives me Gunpowder Gamble charge. So, not only is it better in that regard, it's also better because the Gunpowder Gamble cooldown, where you're able to accrue stacks after using a Gunpowder Gamble, that timer has also been shortened, so you have very high uptime on your Gunpowder Gamble, and it's very easy to get. So it is a very good aspect, don't get me wrong. But in activities where you have a lot of enemies firing on you, it's very dangerous content, and you feel like you're okay on ad clear, there are benefits to running Threaded Spectre over Gunpowder Gamble. Because, as we have already clarified and as we have already showcased, you have a ludicrous amount of ability uptime on this build. As a result of having a ludicrous amount of ability uptime on this build, that means if you're constantly spamming your Ascension, then that means you're constantly creating Threaded Specters, and you can just get a ridiculous amount of Threaded Specters going on the map. So if I sauce that guy, grapple melee this guy, go ahead and hit him, go ahead and hit him, hit another Ascension. Like, you can get Threaded Specters approximately every, like, I would say 7 or 8 seconds, which is very beneficial for any high-end content to not only pull enemy fire and aggro off of you to keep you safe, but to also pull it off all of your teammates. Now, granted, it's not super necessary because, like I said, we have restoration from a ton of sources. We get healing whenever we get a melee final blow. We have things like Woven Mail keeping us safe. We have things like Amplified keeping us safe, not only for the damage resistance buffs that they provide, but also because they misdirect enemy fire when it's targeted at us or allies. But I just did want to throw that out there because I think both can work exceptionally well. I've been enjoying the Gunpowder Gamble variant a little bit more recently, but Threaded Spectre is also spectacular. Just wanted to sprinkle that in there. Now let's talk about stats. As I said before, it is possible to make Inmost Light with the current stat rework better for ability regeneration than it ever was pre-Edge of Fate. For those who don't know, Bungie reworked the stat system so that every single form of ability regeneration is tied to that specific stat. So for something like Spirit of Inmost Light, which gives us ability regeneration for our grenade, melee, and class, Spirit of Inmost Light is actually not going to give the exact same amount of regeneration to all 3 of those specific abilities automatically. It's doing it based on the stats. So let's say, for example, you had 40 grenade stat, 70 melee stat, and 100 class stat. Empowered abilities from Spirit of Inmost Light would regenerate your grenade the least quickly, your melee the second least quickly, and your class the most quickly. And Bungie also said that if you have a stat at 70 stat points, then that is going to replicate the ability regeneration gains that we saw pre-Edge of Fate, which means if we can get over 70 stat points, then we'll actually have better ability regen from ability regeneration sources than we experienced pre-Edge of Fate. That means that if you want maximum ability uptime, you want to have a minimum of 100 stat points in your class stat, 100 stat points in your grenade stat, and 100 stat points in your melee stat. That is going to equate to 190% bonus regeneration for all 3 of those abilities, all from Spirit of Inmost Light in conjunction with all other sources. You don't really care that much about the weapon stat for this build because of how much ability slinging you're doing. You don't really care that much about the super stat for this build because you're just slinging everything with your basic abilities. And you don't care that much about the health stat with this build because the health stat just isn't very good for PvE anyway. Obviously, we can get more than 100 stat points in 3 different stat categories. So what do we want to do when we're looking at approaching the 200 stat packages, where any stat points over 100 is going to give us bonus melee damage for the melee stat, bonus grenade damage for the grenade stat, and an overshield on class ability activation for the class stat? Me personally, I don't really care that much about the overshield at all on the class stat activation. This build simply has too many sources of healing and too many sources of damage resistance for us to need that in any capacity. So I think getting the class stat to 100 on the dot is very ideal and not a point more if you can help it. Mine is currently at 110, but as we continue to play the Edge of Fate and we gain access to more gear, we gain access to higher tier gear, and we gain access to more favorable stat distributions and higher total stat packages with higher tier armor, we're going to be able to have our pick of the litter when it comes to stat distributions right now. So this build is only going to get better with time as you get better armor and better stat distributions. That means that what's left is we are either dumping all of our points into trying to max out our grenade stat to 200 grenade, or our melee stat to 200 melee. And for me, this is going to require a decent bit of testing and a decent amount of gameplay, but here are my two trains of thought going on right now. If you want to run the version of this build with gunpowder gamble, then I would say you probably want to juice up your grenade stat as much as possible, because the grenade stat is going to buff your grapple melee. As we discussed before, both the grenade stat and the melee stat buff your grapple melee, and it is also going to buff the damage of your gunpowder gamble. If you want to run the threaded specter setup instead, the only thing that 200 grenade stat would damage buff is going to be your grapple melee. However, if you got 200 melee stat, then you would be buffing your threaded spike and you would be buffing your grapple melee. That's kind of where I'm sitting at right now. And honestly, you can also totally go with a situation, if you would like, where you can maybe try and spread the love between the two stats. So maybe you go for like 130 in the melee and 140 in the grenade. You don't necessarily have to all in on one or the other, but you are going to want to put the surplus of your stat points into getting these bad boys as much over 100 as you can, so that you can boost up the damage of all of your abilities that you have slinging around. So for armor mods on the helmets, I would definitely go a siphon mod matching the damage type of my primary ammo weapon. So if I'm using a solar weapon, and this kind of goes into the super choice a little bit as well. So if you're using a void weapon, then maybe you want to switch your super to the tether. You'll still get void overshield from faceted purpose, and that way you can go ahead and throw on Harmonic Siphon for the 1 cost, and you'll be good to go when it comes to matching your weapon type. However, if maybe you're using a solar primary ammo weapon, for example, then maybe you rock and roll with Gunpowder Gamble so that you can, once again, run Harmonic Siphon for 1 cost. And the other 2 slots, I would probably go hands-on for bonus super energy on melee kills, because like I said before, Threaded Spike counts for that, and grapple melee also counts for that. So we have 2 different ways to proc that. In this final slot, you could either go Dynamo, as Ascension now procs Dynamo. So if you feel like you're getting more Ascension usages than you're getting Grenade Final Blows, then go Dynamo, because you'll get more mileage out of that. Or if you're going the Gunpowder Gamble version of the setup and not the Threaded Spectre version of the setup, then maybe you could justify Ashes to Assets as well, because once again, this will proc on both your grapple melee and your Gunpowder Gamble Final Blows. And then for stat mods, obviously you're going to go either a grenade stat mod or a melee stat mod right here, so you can overload them over 100. Down on the gloves, we're going to be going with a heavy-handed mod where our powered melee final blows create orbs of power. Once again, threaded spike and grapple melee, both going to make us orbs of power. We're then going to go with impact induction and focusing strike, which grants grenade ability refund and class ability refund with a powered melee attack respectively, which I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I just do want to emphasize how versatile this build is and how good it is at spamming ability refund is going to activate both from your threaded spike melee and your grapple melee. Down on the chest piece, we're just going to go with like a concussive dampener and then resistances depending on the damage type of the enemies in whatever activity you are currently running. So you could go like solar resistance and avoid resistance. There's more than enough energy open for you to run 2 of whatever copy that you want. Down on the boots, if you want to put your ability refunds into overcharge more than they already are, you can run an absolution, and then you can run, I would honestly probably go either an innervation or an insulation. I wouldn't go with anything that gives me melee back, because I can fully recharge my melee with my Ascension activation, which is proccing Gambler's Dodge. I would probably use the last slot to go with a scavenger mod matching the damage type of my heavy ammo weapon, especially for higher end content. Heavy ammo is always very, very important. Finally, on the class item, and I am so happy that I finally get to say that even though we are using Ascension, we are going to run Reaper, which now procs from Ascension, Powerful Attraction to scoop up all nearby orbs, which now procs with Ascension, and Bomber to reduce our grenade cooldown, which now procs with Ascension. This build is in an absolutely beautiful form right now, but we're not even done yet, because some of the artifact mods this expansion make it even crazier. First of all, tightly woven. While woven mail is active, which it always is from Spirit of the Surturachne, gain increased class ability and grenade stats. How much specifically, you might be wondering? 20 increase a pop, which for grenade specifically, 20 grenade over the 100 mark is equivalent to approximately a 13% damage bonus for both your grapple melee and your gunpowder gambles. Next, something like Fever and Chill. Rapid precision hits with solar weapons grant Radiant. Rapid precision hits with stasis weapons grant Frost armor. Obviously only applicable if you're using one of these two element types, but this can be really, really nice because it's another very easy way to get an elemental buff to juice up your class ability regeneration through something like the Facet of Hope. Additionally, Elemental Benevolence, granting allies an elemental buff such as Radiant if you get a final blow with your melee, which gives Radiant to all nearby allies, or just pop an Ascension and giving Amplified to everyone nearby gives class ability energy, which is spectacular because it means you can just keep spamming. It's like a positively, it feeds back into itself. Just keep on spamming Ascension, get all the benefits of Ascension, Jolting, Reaper procs, Dynamo procs, all that goodness, and Elemental Benevolence, as long as you're making other people amplified, just gonna keep giving it back to you. Next, something like Cauterized Darkness, Stasis or Strand debuffed non-boss combatants, so for example, if we throw our Threaded Spike at a target and it severs said target, take increased solar damage from all sources, which of course our Gunpowder Gamble is solar. And if we're running Golden Gun as our super, also solar, which this is going to be actually very nice for the raid, in my opinion. Especially if you maybe want to do a quick little swap to Celestial Nighthawk or something like that, throw your Threaded Spike, pop your Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun, bang, feels very, very nice. Also, something like Elemental Coalescence, defeating targets has the chance to create an elemental pickup matching your equipped super element. If you're running the Shadow Shot Deadfall super, you can make Void Breaches, and if you're running the Golden Gun super, then you can make Fire Sprites, of course. And although I don't have access to it, the final column yet, this is where things get absolutely absurd. Shield Crush. While you have Woven Mail, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage, and while you are amplified or radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. That's insane for this build, considering that you always have Woven Mail and you always have amplified or radiant, typically both at the same time, typically all three at the same time. This seasonal artifact mod takes this build absolutely to the next level. Don't get me wrong. When we go into future expansions and we lose access to this artifact and we no longer have this artifact mod, the build is still absolutely exceptional. As you have seen, everything I've showcased today is without this mod. But when you have this mod on, things get absolutely disgusting. You can also in the final column go with something like Radiant Shrapnel, which is generally looking like it's going to be very good. Dealing sustained weapon damage while radiant, or defeating a Scorch combatant with a weapon causes the target to release solar projectiles that deal damage and Scorch on impact. Or you can go something like Tangled Web, where creating a tangle by defeating a strand debuff target, so if you throw your Threaded Spike at something, or you kill something with a grapple melee, it'll make a tangle, will suspend nearby combatants. Granted, I don't know what the radius of suspension is. If it's a very small radius, then probably not really going to be that big of a deal, not really that favorable, in which case you'll just run Radiant Shrapnel instead. But this Shield Crush right here, absolutely crazy. That's kind of the blueprint for what I believe is going to be my favorite hunter build and my most used hunter build this entire expansion. And like I said, it's only going to get better as we continue to grind out higher tiers of armor, get higher power level, and have access to higher total stat packages on higher tier armor and more favorable distributions where we can pick and choose where our stats go. We're going to be able to get into a situation where I'm hoping potentially we can have, in a perfect world, 100 class stat, 200 grenade stat, and 200 melee stat. I hope you found this video very helpful, and I hope you enjoyed this build very, very much. This was all filmed live at twitch.tv/Mactics. You should stop by and say hi sometime. We've got a very nice community over here. Lots of very kind people, lots of people that love Destiny, lots of people that love builds. I hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to leave a like if you did, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future build videos and future Destiny 2 guide content. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.